Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog the Week 9 NFL Power Poll, ranking each of the teams in tiers from 1 to 32. Going in that order as well. We're not going in reverse descending order, Jake.
Reverse descending order? Isn't that basically contradictory? Reverse descending.
I guess we are going
Oh, so you're going descending of record.
Yes, but we're not going in reverse descending. We're just going regular descending.
So we're not going. Yeah, okay. No, that's ascending. It's actually ascending because it's 1 to 32.
I suppose that's correct. See, if I just knew my words better, this would be a lot easier. But I do have two teams in the top spot for the power poll this week. It's Kansas City and Detroit alone in tier 1 by themselves.
I was about to guess or ask if I could guess, and I would agree with you that we are finally in lockstep of the top tier so far.
DVOA actually came out today. Shout out to our friends at FTN, and they have Detroit as a big number 1 team by a pretty substantial margin in the NFL right now. But it's weird, just sometimes, it's a very impressive win, obviously beating the crap out of Tennessee, but they also beat the crap out of Tennessee. They were 11-point favorites. They should have beat the crap out of Tennessee.
Well, to that point, and I know we're not talking about it, but that's why I'm not moving the Texans up too much off of what they did either.
I moved the Texans down.
After winning, you actually moved them down. Well, then you might be closer to where I had them last week, because I remember last week was the first time you had them higher than I did.
It's true. So Kansas City and Detroit, I think Cuss was giving out a very compelling case for the Lions of why they deserve to be the number 1 team in football. And listen, you look at the results on the field, you look at their offense, and even their defenses remain very good despite the lack of Aiden Hutchinson around. But it's still just watching Kansas City sleepwalk through these games and then just do enough and be like, oh yeah, they were never in chance of losing again. Just every single week. Is this who they are, I guess is the question. Or is this just who they are until January comes, and then they're going to find that other level? Because Pacheco is coming back soon. They'll get Juju back. Hollywood Brown is eventually going to be back. DeAndre Hopkins will be he'll be inserted into this offense somehow, and I guarantee you he's going to end up being good and very helpful to them. That I just see them getting better from here on out.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that we've been talking about so far is I don't think this is who they are completely. And we had Travis Kelce's best game of the season. Actually, Travis Kelce's best game since midpoint last season. So this is, it seems that somebody steps up every week, but it's not like everybody hits all at the same time. And I think that's why we're kind of all sitting here saying it's the comparison I made to you. What was it, week 3? It's the Golden State Warriors during their multiple championship runs. It's like, we'll get through the regular season. We don't have to be the number 1 seed, because once we get to the playoffs, that's when we turn it on and we're good. Old LeBron back with the Heat and stuff like that. It feels like they know who they are. And if they get a loss along the way, they'll be like, whatever. We'll get back to it next week.
Looking at the upcoming schedule for Detroit as well, it doesn't really get hard until the end of the season. Yes, at the Texans is on there 2 weeks from now, or 3 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks from now. But I don't even know if that's that hard of a game, is it?
2 weeks from now, they'll have Nico Collins back. Something I dug into last week is the quarterback pressure they've been giving up without Nico Collins is a little bit greater, which that shouldn't be the reason. Their offensive line has been terrible at pass blocking. But at least with Stroud under quarterback pressure with Nico Collins, is a completely different quarterback. Again, you would say, I understand it's Nico Collins, and let's put his name, let's even say among the Justin Jefferson of the world, because that's how he's played over the last year plus. Even without Justin Jefferson with the Vikings, not oh my God, I can't throw the ball anymore. Sam Darnold even, looking back at last year, Kirk Cousins from past seasons. It's not it should be this big of a drop-off, but it is. It's almost like he's a bottom 10 quarterback without Collins in the lineup, and then he's a top 10 quarterback with them. So I say Nico Collins somewhat fixes it, but they have more issues just in that, because again, that pass blocking is a major issue. Their defense isn't perfect. So I want to say it's a scary matchup. I still think it's a telling matchup. If they went into what I would say Houston, Texans, the way they look right now are a fringe playoff team. And if they lost to the Texans, I think that would be telling.
Yeah, they're a fringe playoff team in the grand scheme of things. They're an absolute lock to make the playoffs, however.
Correct. Yes, that's exactly what I was saying. Yes.
So maybe we'll get to the Texans in a second, but should we give the Texans a bit of leeway like I've been doing with Kansas City the entire time? Or is that just almost exclusively reserved for Kansas City because they've, won 11 in a row, including the Super Bowl in that time?
So I don't say exclusively to Kansas City because, I've been kind of giving a little bit of a pass to the Buffalo Bills. I think the Bills are more, neither of them are in the conversation of the Chiefs. The Chiefs are their own dog, if you want to say that. But I would say the Bills are closer to being excusable of like, hey, we got a Cooper. We're not even still using them 100%. There's still a couple things on defense. They're getting better. It's just, we still are a better team and we can get there. The Texans are like, yes, they should be better significantly with Nico Collins, but there's still too many problems that Nico Collins shouldn't be the problem of everything. Like the Bills, you can say it's multiple things. The Texans, it's like, it's not. It's multiple things that don't get fixed by Nico Collins.
Looking at the Lions' upcoming schedule, they're at the Packers this week. That was going to be a very telling and tough game, except I don't think that Jordan Love is going to play.
I would bet not because it was the same knee, and then I guess playing through that knee is why he hurt his groin. So I would say no, especially we saw earlier this year, and you and I, a lot of people talked about it. They said, why bring Jordan Love back unless he's 100%? Because Malik Willis has been keeping them afloat and actually winning more games than losing. You made that argument time and again. So I would say at least a game, if not more.
And well, it's not even the if not more. I would say that Love would probably try to tough it out and play in this game if the Packers didn't have a bye in week 10.
And that's the big part about it too. So yeah, add that to it.
So at the Packers becomes a slightly easier game, still a losable game for the Lions because I think the Packers with Willis have been pretty good. Just Detroit is currently a better team, but in Green Bay, in division, it's a different style. It's funny because where they just played Tennessee this week. I do think that you'll probably see Willis and that Packers offense look a little bit like what Tennessee wanted to do, just couldn't because they got down by too much too early.
I can see that as well. I mean, I think the Willis offense is going to go back to what it was too in general. There's a lot of Jaden Reed, some Romeo Doubs, but not to what the Romeo Doubs has been with Jordan Love of recent. Some in the run game and Malik Willis just playing control ball and running the ball somewhat himself. It did it fine, replaced him in yesterday's game too. So I don't think it's going to be vastly different, but I think we take Christian, for fantasy purposes, take Christian Watson, Dontavian Wicks off the table. You talk as I try to clear my throat.
Well, after the Packers, the Lions go on this stretch of just beating up on the crappy AFC South. So it's at the Texans. We've kind of conceded that's a tough game, but not. They'll be favored in that game at Houston unless something crazy happens between now and 2 weeks from now. Then at home against the Jags, at the Colts, at home against the Bears. I guess that is one that's pretty tough, but it all depends on how the Bears are going at this point. Do you think that the Hail Mary in a game that I think that the right team won the Washington-Chicago game, weirdly enough, although Washington won on a Hail Mary, just watching and be like, yeah, Washington dominated this game. The Bears couldn't do anything. They just didn't break when they got inside the 10-yard line, which is good. I mean, that's a very classic old school Patriots of like the Brady era way to play when they had the awesome offense and the defense wasn't great, just they didn't give up a ton of touchdowns. That's what the Bears looked like, except they had no offense to go along with it. So they could be reeling at that point, desperately needing the win, but this could just be an easy cruise until they get at home against the Packers on December 5th. Like it's 5 weeks of fun for the Lions, it could be.
It should be, and at this point, I just don't know that you see the Lions losing more than maybe, because you want to say like, oh, they have an off week or whatever it is. We say 4 losses at worst at this point.
Yeah, they end the year at home again. They go home Bears, home Packers, home Bills, so 3 in a row at home, and then at Bears, at Niners, at home against the Vikings. So that one should be
okay.
Like it's a bit more challenging towards the end of the season than this little kind of break that they have in the middle. But they're already 6-1. They played a pretty, I wouldn't say super difficult schedule, but it hasn't been easy by any stretch of the imagination.
No, it hasn't. But I think the biggest question is going to be, has that defense hold up once you face teams that, like when you threw in like the 49ers and the Vikings and even Green Bay at that point, whether or not it's Malik Willis, we're going to see that is, it's held together without Hutchinson, but is that because of the level of opponent they're playing? It's just not the same caliber as like a top 10 offense of what we're talking about with those other teams. Or is it that, it's a loss and maybe they're not dominant, but it's enough. I think that's going to be the answer. And I think that's why I go back to the Texans. I think that if you see the Texans offense with Nico Collins back and the way that Joe Mixon's running the ball, and they're not getting stopped in that game of the Lions defense, then we start to say, oh, okay, maybe the Lions defense is going to be their downfall.
Before we get to tier 2, obviously the Monday night game has not happened between the Steelers and the Giants, so that would affect probably not so much what the Giants are going to do in this poll, but if for some reason the Giants were able to beat the Steelers, I'd probably drop the Steelers a little bit. Probably not even all that much, though, honestly, because, a loss of where I have them right now, who we'll get to in a second. But I do have an underdog entry for the Monday Night Football game. I broke this down more on the quick hitter that I do in the mornings on Mayo Media Network. If you sub to Mayo Media Network right now, you get into a draw for $500. You should do that. I'm giving away the winner tomorrow, Tuesday evening, on the Spread Pick show. But I went Devin Singletary under fantasy points, Wendell Robinson over fantasy points, and Jalen Warren over fantasy points. Does that track in your mind?
A little bit. What's the over on the fantasy points for Wendell Robinson?
7.2.
And it's full or half?
Half on underdog. Like five for 50 gets you there. So 6 for 45 does the trick too.
It's doable. It's Daniel Jones against the Steelers defense, and we've seen Daniel Jones a recent. I don't want to ever put my book on Daniel Jones. That's basically what it says.
I guess so, but I'm just trying to map out the Steelers defense in my mind. So Porter on Neighbors, it's not going to stop him, but it might limit him a little bit. Both Pittsburgh and the Giants bring a ton of pressure at all times, shorter A-dot throws. Does anyone run lower A-dot routes than Wendell? So I can just see like 10, 11, 12 targets for him, even if only half of them are catchable.
I don't even know if he gets that many the way they played their last game. What is Tracy? I think Tracy's more appealing for everything you just mapped out.
Well, that's why I went with the lower on Singletary, because I think it's Tracy who gets that work and not Singletary. So I'll just that's sort of the Tracy play is I'd rather go against Devin Singletary than on Tracy.
Okay. That's fair.
I was thinking about Pickens' higher yardage as well, but I just wanted to put in the 3. But if people don't have an underdog account as of yet, you can use code MAYO right now, and you get a Russell Wilson free pick to add to that as well to boost that up to 10-1 if you want to.
I like that. I actually like the Pickens one better because the Giants are down another corner again. They're just been devastated by injuries and on top of not having a very good secondary to begin with. What is the Pickens over?
I didn't even really consider it. I think my modeling had it about break even, like it was right on wherever the projection. I think it was 70 something, which is very high.
Ooh, that's pretty aggressive. Yeah, I was gonna say that's pretty aggressive. But again, the Giants are hurting right now. I don't know if they need to do it. That would be my biggest concern about Pickens is that they just might smash the run because the Giants also can't stop the run and not even turn to Russell Wilson that much in this game.
Oh, and listen, they're deep. They're horrible at covering the deep ball, but they don't allow quarterbacks a ton of time to throw a deep ball, and that's why I like Warren here. He can either get it done on the ground or he can still become that primary pass catcher out of the backfield. And he looked really good last week.
Finally, because he's back to 100%. And what a shock that all 3 of them would be used. Cordell Patterson, thankfully, is out one more week.
I don't think they're going to use Cordell all that much.
I do. I still think enough that it'll be like Sean Tucker for the Bucs, 5-6 touches.
Tier 2 in the power poll, I have 2 teams. Baltimore drops from 1 spot to 3, and the Bills go from 8 to 4.
Why are you purely basing this off Malik Willis at quarterback now?
I mean, I have worries about Green Bay as well. It's not like I thought they should dominate a pretty terrible Jags team, and even with Jordan Love, they weren't really dominating them. So yeah, there's that part of it. But I also have to project out too. Like we've seen Love miss 2 games with a knee injury. Now he has a groin injury. Like, is he going to be healthy, like fully healthy at any point the rest of this year?
I don't know. If you're basing the report that we got just a little while ago, it says it's what is it? Assumed to be minor, but his week 9 is in doubt, mostly because of what you said. On top of it, they get the extra week with the bye. Their defense has been playing mostly better. I just think they're in the same conversation as the Bills, at least for me. Like I actually have the same 2 teams, but then I would have the Packers in the conversation with these 2.
See, I think that the Bills have played much better recently. The difficult part with the Bills is going to be to gauge their interest level and actually being as good as they can be the rest of the season. I believe they have a 4.5 game lead in the AFC East now, and they just play. I mean, everyone in that division is a bunch of scrubs. They lost to Houston. They lost to Baltimore. They could have won the Houston game. They got absolutely crushed by Baltimore. But we've seen this happen to like this level of team a lot of times. times that, coming into the year, brand new defense. I've just been shocked at how good their defense has been.
Yeah, but I think it's not of their level, but I've been shocked about that Packers defense too, is that their Packers defense has been something for a problem for most teams.
Well, I guess the way that I would assess it in this situation is, who would I rather have at quarterback? I'd rather have Josh Allen. All things being equal,
Sure.
looking at both defenses right now, I think I'd take the Bills defense over the Packers defense.
I would too, but I think
that separates them at least a tier.
I was going to say, I think I would take the complement of weapons as they stand right now for the Packers offense over the Bills.
Ooh, I don't know about that.
I would take Jacobs over Cook, barely. I would take, you go down the wide receiver crew. Of course, Amari Cooper at some point, but they're bringing him along super slowly. Like he barely saw a tick up. And then the breakout of Coleman, sure, that's cool, but he's a rookie. We're talking about the fact that we go Reed, Dobbs, the Watson-Wicks situation, Tucker Kraft. That's 5 and the running back versus 3.5 at bet. Like, that's all. Like, as of today, now this could change, and I'm sure that's part of your argument of projecting forward is that Cooper's not completely into it. And I had Cooper as a top 20 play this week, thinking that they were just going to increase the snaps after he played almost 50% last week, and it was going to be, okay, cool, he's in the mix, scored a touchdown. Did not happen. But as of now, I feel like the compliment. So I guess it comes down to how big of the offset of the quarterback versus the wide receivers are. And if you want to argue it's that big, I'm not going to argue much with you. It's just why I put the Packers in the conversation.
Well, I do think, listen, the Packers are in the conversation. I just don't have them as a part of tier 2. But this is actually really nice for the Bills that they can bring Cooper along, get him acclimated, well, kind of boosting the stock of Shakir and Coleman at the same time. Like, look how much better Coleman and Shakir have looked since Cooper has arrived last week.
I think it's more so Coleman. I think Shakir's been Shakir, and that was the biggest thing is when Cooper
and he was banged up.
Shakir. Yeah, like Shakir wasn't going to have the drop off. The big thing about Coleman is I don't know if I said it to you or Meany or like the 18 podcasts I do, but Coleman was miscast before this. He was playing the outside. He was playing the X. He can't turn corners. We can't get downfield deep, and that's not something that he's probably going to ever get because of his legs and his stride. Like that's some wide receivers are just built that way. Like if he dropped 20 pounds, he'd still not be the fastest because of his legs and his stride and how long it is. And now because of that, he also doesn't run the crispest routes. So being that X in that situation is kind of like, what do you do for us? And this is what I'm referencing. And I don't remember if I brought it up to you, is to use him like the Saints used Michael Thomas. And now with Cooper there, now you'll be able to do that. And now Coleman's not facing top coverage. And now he can do what he's doing so far. So I still think Cooper at some point will be their true one. And I put that in quotes. But I think similar to the Packers, they don't necessarily need any of the 3 to be, and I think that's going to work really well for them.
Yeah, it's funny because when I was thinking about comps from earlier in the year, that these two teams would not have landed on my radar as teams that are kind of similar, but that's just kind of the way it's worked out.
All of a sudden they are?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of weird how that worked out. Yeah, I agree with you.
I'm not really, I bumped Baltimore down a spot, like they lost to the Browns, division game, big Jameis game, and Baltimore was 2 drops away from winning that game by a bunch. So I'm not too worried about Baltimore.
And you know what's funny is you brought up the thing earlier about the Chiefs is like watching that game with the Ravens. It just felt like the Ravens should have been down by more. Like it felt like they were making mistakes and like they couldn't click. Like it was just like, oh, look, they got this going. Oh, no, they made a big mistake. They just gave this up on defense. So like, it almost felt like looking at that game, they should have lost by like 3 touchdowns. And the fact that they were even close, I think is a testament to, hey, even on an off day, they're still pretty scary.
Well, I think that's really the case for the Chiefs in all of this, is that they keep having what we perceive to be off days, yet they still don't lose.
Yeah, that's exactly. So that's why I'm okay with Baltimore being this high.
For almost about 2 decades, the irons were really the only good part of my golf game, unless you include 300-yard drives, which meant hitting it about 150 yards straight and 150 yards with slice into the woods to the right. So I finally went and got lessons, straightened out my swing, and all of a sudden I could drive the ball pretty decently, pretty straight. And then my irons just kind of went wayward with the new compression that I was getting onto the ball. So it was time for me to make a change with my irons. So when I heard about the new PXG Black Ops irons and how they can dramatically improve my game, I had to give them a try. Booked a fitting with the PXG location, brought in my current irons, and took the PXG challenge. The staff was amazing. We worked on my ball flight through TrackMan in order to find the perfect irons and the perfect length and the perfect loft for what my game demands these days. And the new Black Ops irons are incredibly easy to hit, they maximize performance, and they're fun. Oh, and they're only $149.99 a stick. That is a great price for a great golf iron. So take the PXG Irons Challenge. It's a ton of fun, and if PXG's new Black Ops irons don't outperform your current irons by delivering either more distance or tighter dispersion, that means better accuracy, during your fitting, you'll get a $250 MasterCards reward card. Hurry, this offer ends October 7th. Book your fitting today at pxg.com. That's pxg.com. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity. What's something you'd like to learn? Gardening? A new language? Or, for me personally, how to finally beat your best friend in golf? Not Cuss, but, my other friends. I want to beat them at golf. I can beat Cuss, no problem. Therapy can help reconnect you with your sense of wonder because your back-to-school era can come, honestly, at any age. It's helpful learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries, and it empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It isn't just for those who've experienced major traumas. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All the best things that you need. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com /PatMayo today and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com /PatMayo. I have a big tier next. So tier number 3 involves a lot of teams that you probably have jumbled up in tier number 2 or 3 or even 4. I go Minnesota and Green Bay, Washington, Philly, Houston, Pittsburgh, and Atlanta as tier 3 in the NFL right now.
So I completely agree with all of them because I would add, except we talked about Packers being in tier 2 for me. The only one is, I don't know if it's past history or if it's just...
You're worried about the Vikings, aren't you?
No, I actually wouldn't put them at the top of the tier anymore. It's more so, I'm more I can't trust the Falcons. I just can't.
But I can't either, but no one can. Just, they should... I really think they should have lost to Tampa Bay again. But they didn't.
And so that's what I'm saying. If they're not playing Tampa Bay, that's 2 wins where Kirk Cousins went nuclear. If Kirk Cousins faced Tampa Bay every single week, he'd be throwing for legit 7,000 yards and 50-something touchdowns. It's stupid. And outside of those 2 games, and I'm not saying to take them off the table, but outside of those 2 games, they've been a very inconsistent Jekyll and Hyde team. And I guess if you include those 2 games against the Buccaneers, there's Jekyll and Hyde there too. But I couldn't put him in this tier because honestly, the team that's not there is, if you told me a straight matchup this week, Falcons versus Bengals, I'm taking the Bengals.
The Bengals suck without T. Higgins. They're 0-3 without. They're 0-3 without Higgins. They lost to the Patriots without T. Higgins.
I knew where you were about to go with that. You stopped yourself. Usually you drop them. Why you just drop the bombs on the show? I'm not afraid.
Listen, I'm trying to cut back a little bit. My wife was watching with my sons the other day, and they're like, "You really swear a lot on this show." I was like, "Yeah, I guess I don't have to. I'll save it for the spread show, and occasionally a nice little f-bomb drop on this one. But it's less editing they have to do for TV for this show, which is is very helpful to some of the editors. They do appreciate that from time to time, but. I don't think listen, the Falcons are at the very bottom of this tier for a reason. And
sure.
Maybe I should have just stuck with my guns and put San Francisco in the spot instead of Atlanta. But there's a really telling stretch coming up, I think. So it's at home against the Cowboys this week for Atlanta, then at the Saints. So it's the 5-game run. Cowboys, Saints, Broncos, Chargers, Vikings. They could go 0-5 over that stretch. They could go 5-0 over that stretch. And all of those games are probably going to be 3-point games.
So to your point there, I agree, but I think that's why, me, I've been enough with the excuses for the 49ers, but to piece together that win and hold off the Cowboys trying to come back surprisingly in that game, I would put Atlanta in the conversation with the Bengals, with the Chargers, with the 49ers. So it's more so pull Atlanta off that tier and get in the conversation in the next tier. Honestly, like the inverse of them, like how different are they from the Broncos right now? Like at some point, like it's the Broncos just keep winning with defense and Bo Nix being able to show up some games. I don't know that they're that different than it's the defense for them, inconsistent offense, and then you have a mostly consistent offense, inconsistent defense for the Atlanta Falcons, sometimes inconsistent offense with Kirk Cousins just 2 games ago. But I would say Chargers, Falcons, Broncos, 49ers, like maybe even the Bengals in that next tier, and that's why I would just knock them to that next tier. I like everybody else you have in here. Like, because you just said it. If you told me next week in Tampa Bay, would you really be 100% confident the Falcons win that game?
No, but they would be favored again. Like, just with the way that Tampa Bay is currently constituted, down Godwin for the year, Evans for a bit, and working all these new guys, and even Sterling Shepard got hurt in the game yesterday. So they are a bit behind the 8 ball, and Tampa's defense is, listen, Atlanta's defense is not good. Tampa's defense is bad.
Tampa's defense is almost as bad as the Jaguars. Actually, it's probably a similar tier, but I think the Buccaneers are going to be able to survive it so much.
Agreed.
The fact that, well, so they're the Steelers without the defense. So I'm not to the tier of the Steelers' survivability, but because the running backs are both working so good together, almost kind of, you know what? They're the Falcons of last year. It's Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. They just lean on them for all the games.
They do lean on them a ton, but a lot of it's just an extension of the passing game, which I do really like, and that they that they haven't just used Rashad. I mean, Rashad White kind of blew the game for them off the hop when he put the ball on the ground. That was kind of the end of it for them. Like, they were playing catch up the entire time after that. And do you think the Pitt second touchdown was a touchdown? Like, if they had called that a fumble on the field, do you think it would have got overturned to being a touchdown, or would have it stood?
No, I was legit in the middle of tweeting, I can't believe he just pulled the Deshaun Jackson, and then stopped because they upheld it. And I was like, what? Like, what angle did they have? Like, because of course we couldn't get the shot straight down the line because God forbid we have that shot somewhere, or just what we've been complaining about for years is some kind of technology that could, oh, by the way, track exactly where it is. No, it got knocked out right before he stepped in. Like, this was not Deshaun Jackson, of course, just putting on the ground, but that wasn't a touchdown.
Should I not have kept Minnesota at number 5? I'm going to give them a bit of a mulligan for the Thursday night game, not only because I lost a substantial amount of money on them to beat the Rams in that game, but now they get the 10 days off, they get a little bit of time to regroup. Or are we seeing what happened last year, where the Flores defense looked awesome to like mid-season, and then they just started getting shredded?
So the funny thing is we actually had Alec Lewis, who covers the Vikings for The Athletic, on the Sirius XM. Meany and I had him on. And that was the last question. That was my question. I said, we hear about the Flores defense, and I haven't referenced you when I brought it up. I said, we were talking about the fact that Flores defense starts out hot every single year, and at some point it feels like it gets quote unquote figured out, and it starts to struggle. And I said, do you have that concern? Or it's like, this is a new defense scheme this year, slightly differently. And he said, it's weird. There's no explanation for it, but he feels the same covering this team for the past 2 years. So if you have somebody that's their, like, they don't do it, it's not all 32 teams. His mind is on that team every single week, and he's thinking the same. I think there's a legitimate concern. So you want to knock him down a few spots, but they're still in this tier, so why does it really make a big difference? So I think they deserve to still be here, but maybe not 5.
No, but I think it's like a coin flip between all of them. So Minnesota 5, Green Bay 6, Washington remains at 7. That just feels like the sort of win that it's almost like they're sort of the anti-San Francisco this year, where everything is just going so wrong for San Francisco and they're trying to keep their head above water. Everything just seems to be going right for Washington.
I agree with you in the fact that if we get to the playoffs, I feel like they probably could be like a one and done. It's just
I could see them making a run too, because
really?
Yeah, well, Jaden Daniels,
I think at some point it stops.
It could. But I think a lot of what we've seen over the past few weeks, like we just assumed, like we make certain baseline assumptions about teams coming into every season, that they're good at this, they're bad at this, and it takes us a while to react to like, oh, like they're substantially better at this one thing than I thought that they were going to be. And with Washington, I think it's twofold. There was the outlier of Daniels. Like, everyone kind of thought, I mean, listen, we did the quarterback ranking show, and people like kind of laughed at me and you for having Jaden Daniels as like a top 7 quarterback. Turns out we weren't high enough on Jaden Daniels.
Exactly.
This he's like ranking him over Anthony Richardson. People were like, well, that's stupid. It's like, well, is it? We'll see. And a lot of it was you talking about how good of a downfield passer he is. Now, their offense has been moving a ton. This is the second game this season that they've struggled in the red zone, the Giants game being the other one, where, listen, sometimes just putting up field goals is good enough, but it's the two facets of their game, which I think are completely underrated. Like Daniels being good is surprising, but it's not shocking. He was the third overall pick in the draft. He was great in college. This makes sense. It's just happening a lot faster than I think the people thought. And he's a true game breaker in that sense. Their offensive line has been awesome, which I don't think that any of us saw coming. And I don't know if it's their defense or if it's just the defensive line specifically, but it's really good. Not the overall defense, but they get to the quarterback. They don't make a ton of stupid plays. They don't shoot themselves in the foot with a bunch of penalties. They did a little bit offensively on Sunday against the Bears, but it was my main handicap coming into the week against the Bears was Caleb Williams is not going to be good in this game because Washington is going to get pressure up the middle, and look what happens to Caleb Williams the moment you put pressure on him. He starts running around in circles in the pocket.
Yeah, so I agree with everything you said, and of course the offensive line. The defensive line was something we went into this season, and I think that we drew the comparison, at least I did, drew the comparison to the old Giants Super Bowl teams where the secondary still wasn't very good. It's just they could get after the quarterback, and because of that, the secondary could kind of make up for their deficiencies. I feel like at some point this is going to bite them, especially like they still got plenty of pressure without Allen, which was a big loss for them, but not having Jonathan Allen is going to be significant going forward in the fact that if they face a team with an offensive line that gives their quarterback any time, hell, if they face the Buccaneers right now, and yes, their Buccaneers defense is trash, but we saw the stats during the game yesterday, is the fact of how quickly Baker gets it out, and there's not even time to get pressure on him. Teams like that are able to at least either withstand the pressure or their game plan is to get the ball out quickly. I think that secondary gets carved up, and that's my concern is that, Washington, yes, offense, Jaden Daniels, not a concern. Brian Robinson's great. Everything's clicking on offense. It's what happens when their defense actually has to face an offensive line and offense that can withstand that front four. It's similar to the Giants. If the Giants front four gets pressure, they're in a game, and somehow they stay in a couple of these games. But we've seen the few games where they don't get pressure for the game. Are they first or second still in the league in sacks? But the two biggest games where they just got lit up.
I guess my counter to that would be if that starts happening and Washington has to play a shootout, unlike the Giants, they can.
They can. I just don't know if they could withstand everything. Like right now, they face Detroit. I think they get waxed.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, Detroit's, I have them rated as the second best team in the league. But I do think that they're a team that can kind of go toe-to-toe. Like, Tampa's a really weird comparison because, they played Tampa in week 1 and lost. Then Tampa beat Detroit. That's the only loss of the year. I think that Washington would be a bigger challenge to Detroit than a lot of teams, weirdly enough.
In the NFC?
In the NFC, because I
think the 49ers would be a bigger threat.
The 49ers at full health, yes, and they're probably a bigger threat, but I'm just thinking stylistically, Washington can do basically what we saw Minnesota do to Detroit towards the end of the game when they finally started generating the pressure on Goff, and Goff started to fold a little bit in that game, where with Washington, I think they can kind of go toe-to-toe with them offensively, keep up on the scoreboard. Even if they're down, they can score chunk plays very quickly, catch up, and they have the out of, they only need 1 or 2 big plays from their defensive line, and it's not like they blitz a ton, they just get pressure to force that turnover. So if you can just kind of stay in these games, jab back and forth, kind of push some rounds, that Washington can stay in those spots and have that big play to win a game.
If they could. And just saying, again, just my biggest concern is that what if that front four isn't, and then you start bringing an extra defender, and then all of a sudden that secondary that's already at the whim of everybody else.
If we're going to sit here and say who's going to win the game, I'm going to pick Detroit, but I'm trying to give you different ways.
I know. I'm just trying to think Minnesota. If Minnesota withstands their defensive pressure, should win.
Yeah, but here's the sneaky thing about Minnesota: their offense secret sucks.
I don't think its secret sucks. I think its secret sucks. I think your argument before about the offense sucking with and without, I think with the Higgins situation, I think the offense with and without Aaron Jones sucks.
They didn't even look very good against a bad Rams D.
Yeah, but this is kind of the whole, the Rams just kind of, we knew were better than they were. They just had to get all back together, and they did. Where do you have the Rams? Right now, I would take the Rams over the Cowboys.
I have them slightly behind the Cowboys. Maybe you're right. I want to see it more than 1 week. If they go into Seattle and pump Seattle this week, then I can see. I have all of the other 3 NFC West teams in a tier by themselves. Just because they're all basically the same to me at this point.
They're all the same thing, same team. Just
like the Rams have the most name value of any of these teams. But again, I still do not trust their defense. And maybe their defense will look a little bit better now that they can actually sustain things on offense, because we see that happen a lot. And this was one of my arguments to Cust coming into the year about the Jets defense, is that maybe the Jets defense isn't actually all that good. Maybe it looked really good last year because teams knew they didn't have to do anything offensively to beat them. Like when you have such a historically bad offense, a lot of times that gets correlated with like, quote, a really good defense. It's just the offenses don't take a lot of chances or risky opportunities against you because they don't have to.
I just want you to know, I tuned in specifically because I just wanted to see Cust in a meltdown after what happened yesterday, and I didn't, but I did get the sneeze. I got the sneeze.
You got the sneeze?
Yes. I was losing it. I don't know what I was crying and laughing at more. It was you, and then freaking the deadpan reaction was like, that was demure, and then or you losing it on the table.
The sneeze caught me off guard. It really, and he did it twice too. Philly.
Anyway,
is Philly just going to be there in the end, and we're just going to be like,
yes.
They're not very good. They're not very good. Oh, they're in the NFC Championship.
Pretty much. I mean, how much different are they than the Chiefs, and the fact that just they're not undefeated is like, man, this team doesn't look great, and they keep winning games. They lost a couple, and a lot of it was early on some injuries and the secondary. Which what a shock when you have two high profile playing, as in like they're playing a lot of snaps, rookies, and a third being involved, that, oh my God, they're getting exposed for the first couple games. What a shock. And now it's starting to come back around a little bit. And I'm not saying that I'm scared of the Eagles defense at all, but you get that secondary, you're talking about one of the best corners in the draft, and then another one that people didn't think they should have been able to get where they got, and everybody was pissed off about it. And oh, by the way, now their secondary is starting to play mid-level, and all that needs to do is play mid-level, and now the Eagles are scary enough to be, oh wow, they're healthy. Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown, oh, they're both healthy. One has a good game, the other one doesn't. Who cares? Because they have so many ways to beat you, including Jalen Hurts stealing 3 touchdowns on the ground. Thank you very. Was that not the most? I don't know. Like, if I was Saquon Barkley, I would have been pissed off that Jalen Hurts stole that 3rd touchdown and walked over and handed me the ball. That was such a dick move on his own team.
I thought it was a nice gesture.
I didn't think it was a nice gesture. You took the touchdown from him.
Listen, I'm sorry that you're only concerned about individual play. Saquon Barkley's here for the team, Jake.
My dog's named Barkley. I still have a soft spot for him, even on the Eagles, and that pissed me off when he walked over. Here, you can spike it since I've took the 3rd touchdown today.
Listen, it's probably on that play, like a 70% chance that Saquon Barkley scores a touchdown, or they can run a play that has a 99% success rate. You do that.
I get it. It just felt like kind of a weird move just to walk over and be like, here.
I wonder if that was a conversation that they had with Barkley before they signed him. It was like, look, you're not going to have as many touchdowns as you think because this is the play that we're running when we get in close.
Like I'm sure, and I'm sure he went to the team tag.
And you need to be okay with
and I'm sure he went there to be like, oh, I'm on a contending team. This is great. I don't care if I score 0 touchdowns.
Well, as a recovering Giants fan, you could probably speak to this. That
I'm not recovering yet.
You're just out. But I've seen a lot of
I've been out for years.
I've seen like a lot of Giants fans, like moron Giants fans, be like, I can't believe they let Barkley go. Look how good he is. Like, what would Barkley be doing on the Giants besides having good stats and them having exactly the same record?
Nothing. That was this. Oh, what a shock that Mara doesn't want to get rid of Joe Sheen, who is finally making smart decisions with the roster. Like, I could be taken aback from the Giants and still look at what he did. People are arguing it's one of the best draft classes of any of the teams this year, and not re-signing a guy who was going to take up so much of your cap, be wasted on the team when we were complaining about the fact that they did this in the first place when they drafted him. They put him on a team that wasn't ready for a star running back, and oh, by the way, what did it do? Absolutely dog blank is what it did. So, yes, he deserved to be on another team. He should be on another team, and he wouldn't be helping the Giants win any games this year. Good for Barkley.
Haven't seen anything on the Diggs MRI yet, though, but I worry that he might be done for the season.
He's at least, I would assume he's at least done for a couple weeks because he kind of got jammed. They said no contact, and I get no contact, but he was jammed up with the corner when it happened, and he tried to break off his route, and that's when. So, like, I guess to me that was kind of contact because you're not in your normal motion, and if you watched it, you could see where it happened. But it was bad enough that he immediately grabbed his knee and went down, which makes me feel like you said, it could be season ending. and it could be a few weeks. I think the biggest thing, like I said, is Nico Collins needs to come back. But why I wouldn't have the Texans that high is because I would almost chalk this up to a loss coming up. Like Tank Dell and the way they rotate their second wide receiver now was third. For fantasy purposes, when we talk about it in the waiver column and stuff like that, I'm not chasing any of them because they rotate them, and it's just the matchups and how they're going to use them. And no, Tank Dell this week, and they're probably going to give Joe Mixon another 30 carries just to try and win this game.
Yeah, it'll be Dell will be out there the vast majority of the time. Then it'll be some sort of like 2 to 3 man rotation between Woods, Hutchinson, and Opeachy Premier, who they ended up totally forgot John Mechie was on the team still.
Yeah. Mechie actually stepped in. Hutchinson's role didn't change. Mechie actually stepped in more in the Diggs role. So, like, again, that's also something we've talked about many times before is in-game wide receiver depth chart. Due to an injury is a lot of times it's different the next week when you have a full week to plan for that wide receiver not being in there. So I wouldn't bank anything off of just what happened in that sample.
Yeah, and if you hear me talk about Xavier Hutchinson and wanting to play him in daily or take the hires on underdog, just text me and be like, Pat, just remember this never works out well for you.
You need to give up the Hutchinson.
Yeah, I don't even know why I like the guy. I have no idea. It was just like I really like Lucas Krull this week, and I think that every other tight end on Denver had a touchdown.
You should get the poster of the Krull movie behind you.
I really should. I don't even know why. If his name wasn't Krull, if his last name was Smith, I wouldn't give a shit about this guy. But here we are.
Liam Neeson was in that movie, right?
It's not even that. I don't know what I'm thinking of. I mean, there's the Krull from The Simpsons, there's the Krull from the movie, but when I think about Krull, because I can't even remember if this is his name or not, I think about one of those big lizard people from Donkey Kong Country 2, Diddy Kong's Quest.
Oh, like the family?
No, yeah, just like one of the bad like lizard people that just kind of like walks around aimlessly like this.
Wait, the one that's like on multiple levels? You're not talking about like one of the higher up like bosses or anything like that? No, just
like one of the regular ones. That's just what I think when I think Krull.
Now I'm curious. You should do your next tier while I look this up.
All right, tier number 4. I don't think that is his name. I just in my mind that's what sticks out. Tier number 4: San Francisco, Tampa Bay, Chicago, and Cincinnati remain at number 4. I don't know what to do with any of these teams. I think they're all like good. I think San Francisco is better, but again, it's like Debo got hurt again in the game, so who knows when he's coming back? Maybe Ricky Bullets can step in. You got Juwan Jennings. Like they have a bye week, which is super helpful at this time. Maybe McCaffrey comes back. Jordan Mason gets hurt in the game. It just feels like they lose a player and a half every single week, and eventually it might catch up with them, but they're still tops in the division right now, or at least tied for the tops in the division. Like this bad start and horrific start has not really handicapped them as it pertains to winning the NFC.
Yeah, this is, I've been sitting here saying like, oh, stop giving the 49ers excuses. And I was saying like, haha, I was right or whatever. They're going to get McCaffrey back though.
Yeah, listen, they're probably going to be fine. They go on to bye. We can drop them down a little bit this week. I mean, if all things being equal and San Francisco was playing Atlanta this week, I'd probably bet on San Francisco, but I'll have them one spot behind. Kudos to Atlanta for beating the Bucs twice, taking a stranglehold in that division. You got the Bucs. I think they'll get it figured out because offensively, I still think they're going to be all right, and they play in that crap division. Chicago and Cincinnati, they're both in good divisions, and I mean, I wouldn't do it yet, but the Browns could beat Cincinnati now with Jameis, I think.
I think there's I think the Browns are now in the mix with Jameis. I mean, that was what they say was the 6 out of 7 or something like that games between Flacco and Winston that they've thrown for 300 yards, and we've never had one for the entire time of Watson since he's been with this team. By the way, I can see why, because there's Critter, Crowbot, Croctopus, Crow, Crunch. But anyway, this is what I thought you were talking about. It's King Crusher Cruel.
That's it.
That's why King Cruel and King Crusher Cruel. That's why I thought those are more a little bit like boss level ish guys, like higher level.
Jake, I haven't played this game in like 30 years. This is just what's sticking out in my mind.
I have a semi-eidetic memory. If it's going to come to video games from the 90s and early 2000s, I'm going to remember stuff.
All right. Well, you beat me on that one. Hey, do you have anything really to say about Cincinnati? Like they seem like the most.
Yeah.
Like I have them at 15. I feel like they're the most average team in the league right now.
But that's the thing. It's like I feel like any given week they could probably beat almost anybody. I want to say the Chiefs. Even in Cincinnati, I would take the Chiefs. Even in Cincinnati, I would take Detroit. But the Ravens in Cincinnati, I could see them winning that game.
Yeah, but
Buffalo,
I could also see them losing to Miami at home.
Right. Well, I don't disagree. Like they're most bizarro but it's any given week, and I think they're going to. I think it comes down to what you said. I think Higgins is a significant enough part that their offense doesn't click without him. Because again, this goes back to something we talked about in week 1 when I brought up that Yoshevich is not the perfect complement to fit T. Higgins' loss. Is that he's their slot guy? He needs to be their slot third wide receiver, and despite his usage, that's where he's best. And if anybody was going to replace Higgins, it'd be Burton, but Burton's not ready, and Burton has the coaching issues they're still talking about. So you're right in the fact that you lose Higgins is a significant loss, because also at the same time, sure, Zach Moss and Chase Brown are doing well, but they're inconsistent in their own right, and it's not Joe Mixon back there anymore. So I do think that T. Higgins is enough of a loss that if you said no T. Higgins, I'd say they could be by the Dolphins. But if they do have T. Higgins, I think they're a contender. And so maybe earlier in the show, I should you were right in the fact that I shouldn't have underrated what the loss of T. Higgins was as much as you were making it out to be.
Tier number 5. What do we got here? We got the Chargers, Dallas, and Denver as tier number 5. The Chargers are.
I put the Rams in there.
Hey, listen, great. I have the Rams in the next tier. Denver is the one I wanted to talk about. I think they could beat the Ravens this week, because they are structured a lot like. I mean, it's not as good because the running game isn't as good, but they kind of remind me of the Roethlisberger Steelers. Cuss brought up the Mark Sanchez Jets. Even they're kind of the good version of the Jets from last year, because Nix is better than Zach Wilson.
He is, but Nix still shows the Nix issues.
Sure, but you're gonna have to live with that. But I think that he can do more. There's enough upside with Nix, be it with that, he can make these short passes. He can run a little bit. And he doesn't seem to have the devastatingly terrible decision every single week, a la Zach Wilson or Will Levis, whoever it is. He can kind of keep his composure a little bit. And he almost seems like he's been coached up to know what he has to do in order to win these games, relying on the defense. The defense is really good.
It is. My concern about going into Baltimore is the fact that everybody's going to talk about the Ravens defense being so susceptible to the pass, and that's cool. That's fine. But where is their strength? And you still can't. You cannot run against the Ravens, and that takes away Nick's game. That includes Nick's. And I think if you take that away from him, you're going to rattle him, because we've seen this with other quarterbacks, especially young quarterbacks too, is you take away a dimension in their game early in their career, and they just don't know what to do. You brought up Caleb Williams. You bring pressure, he doesn't know what to do. And I'm just worried that Nix, without that running ability this week, I think the Ravens secondary, despite being very vulnerable, I think you're going to see some kind of like last week's. Well, I don't know if you want to call it last week or 2 weeks ago, but the 0 target game for Cortland Sutton. He's just dumping things off left and right and just trying to find ways to make things happen. I think that this could be the game that basically the offense gets exposed in this game, especially because you're not going to get a bounce-back game from Javonte Williams, not against that Ravens defense. So where do you turn in this game? And I just don't want to put it on Nick's shoulders.
Kroll?
Yes, place. The other two, with Troutman and the other jabroni tight end that I never even knew.
Fake Akins.
Yeah,
the diet is in there. He's the diet version of the Cleveland guy.
When they said Akins or Atkins or Howard, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I was because I was all excited. I got excited for Kroll.
It was who the hell is that? I think he was 45. Who the hell is that guy? I was of course, I've never heard of him. The Broncos. They're like the new Raiders. They just have random dudes on their team who catch a pass or score a touchdown every single week now. The one thing that I did notice with the Ravens that stymied them a little bit, I still think that the Ravens should have beat the Browns. 2 bad drops cost them that game. Jameis tried to... Lamar made the right throw. Did Bateman lose that in the sun? What happened on that play?
Yes. Everybody came for him on that, but it came directly. You
hit
saw
him in the face.
It smacked him right. Yeah, it was basically an outfielder in baseball having to be stuck staring straight into the sun. Yeah. Happened to me playing baseball. That sucks.
Yeah, it's no fun. And Kyle Hamilton drops the pick that also ends the game as well. So again, I'm not too worried about them. But what the Browns did well against Lamar, and we actually saw Washington do kind of a minor version of this as well, but Washington could only contain Lamar from really getting to the outside and running around. He was just able to beat them with his arm because they weren't really generating a ton of pressure on Lamar. They were just kind of containing him. That's what they decided to do defensively. It was a strategy. It worked for a bit, then it didn't work. What the Browns were able to do is what we saw back in week 1 against the Chiefs. Chiefs, and we kind of forgot about it because they haven't played that many teams that have a really good defensive line, but they basically had to triple Myles Garrett. It just allowed everyone else to run free at Lamar, and it did disrupt their offense a lot. Their offensive line isn't good. And that's the one thing that I think that Denver can do here is generate a ton of pressure on Lamar without having to blitz, which is the way that you try to beat Lamar. Or at least limit
try
it.
to. Yeah, and if this is a competitive game and ends up being like a 17-14,
17-10
situation, that wouldn't shock me. But I think that's the biggest issue is that I just don't see Knicks being able to do too much to be able to win. But hey, maybe it happens when they somehow win the game 13, they get a defensive turnover. They win 13-10 on their end.
That's the whole thing. If you think that it's sort of the Falcons argument too, where if they play every game within 3, then theoretically they could lose all of those games just as easily as they could win all of them if you flip a coin. If you think that the game could be 17-14 in favor of Baltimore, like that's what you'd pick, then you almost have to concede that Denver could win the game too, because one fluky thing happens and it's 20-17.
I take it you're hitting the cover and the under as of right now because it's 9.5 Baltimore, 44.5 for the over under.
Yes, I am, but we'll see. And that's for the spread pick show, Jake, and the best bet show.
Wait. The spread pick show. I know it's probably going to have changed, but did you not crap a brick when you saw that the Jets were favored by 1.5? They opened 1.5 for the Texans.
No, I guessed it. I got that game right on the guess the spread show.
Did you?
Yeah.
I missed that. You know Vegas better than I do, and Vegas is drunk. Come on.
The Jets. The funny thing is, I believe. I mean, we can talk about the Jets right now. We're done with Denver. Do you care to talk about Dallas or the Chargers? They're just the same as they are every week.
And you know who they are.
Yeah.
I would say the only thing, if you want to talk fantasy, is that Quentin Johnston might have got Wally pipped.
Nah, he'll be fine when he comes back. Unless they trade.
Joshua Palmer had 2 good games in a row. They might be frustrated
because Quentin Johnson isn't there. Once he comes back, he's going to be fine. He and McConkey are the 2 best receivers. Palmer's a decent third. If they trade for Deontay Johnson, then I'd have worries, but they're not, so I don't. Next tier 6, is the AFC. You've wanted to talk about the Rams this entire time. I go Seattle, Arizona, LA Rams, 19, 20, and 21. I mean, I probably should have the Rams in the Seattle spot and Seattle in the Rams spot, but Seattle seems like they suck, man.
Seattle's the lesser version of the Falcons and Buccaneers.
But they just crushed the Falcons. If the Seahawks played games indoors, I think they might be undefeated.
We talked about that last week. It was the Jared Goff argument that I said you threw on them.
But listen, it worked out pretty true against Buffalo. They played outside and got smoked.
Well, here's the good thing. Here's the good thing. They're home against the Rams this week, so you get your answer.
No, and I'd probably end up betting the Rams here.
The Seattle's only favored by 1 right now.
I know, but the Rams have the extra time too. They have the 10 days rest.
Yeah.
Like I'd like
under 48.5.
I think I'd like Seattle more if they were in Los Angeles. And Arizona's like, Arizona should actually just be ranked next to Atlanta because they're basically the same team.
I was surprised by that Arizona outcome, honestly.
Because it looked like Miami was just curb stomping them, and then all of a sudden Arizona won.
And they just flipped the switch, and on top of it, they flipped the switch in the biggest way is what we've been talking about is that Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison haven't had a connection, a rapport this entire season. And you're going up against the secondary that's been shutting everybody down. Jalen Ramsey was top 5 in the league, and nobody, because I saw all the stats getting thrown out last week, and I even included one of them. He hadn't even given up 100 yards yet against him. And everybody's like, oh my God, he's been dominant. And then everybody's like, well, guess we're sitting Marvin Harrison this week, including myself. I had Marvin Harrison at like wide receiver 30 because the rapport hadn't been there, and you're facing Ramsey in the secondary of the Dolphins. And then, again, watching that game, maybe you can explain. Maybe you saw something I didn't. Like, it just felt like there's a switch that flipped, and all of a sudden Murray and Harrison knew what each other were thinking.
I completely agree. And even with the long 3rd down conversion that got overturned in the Cardinals' favor to extend that drive, which really led them to win the game, it was just kind of a chuck and a prayer, like, Kyler threw it to a spot, and Marvin just ended up there. He was like, all right, here we go.
So maybe we're going to get more of that going forward. Is just not throw it up completely like that, but throw it up and know that Marvin can go get it. He's going to turn it to Daniel Jones with Malik Neighbors.
As someone who was sitting on a pretty substantial payout on Underdog, had Tyreek Hill had over 83.5 yards, they just didn't use him in the second half, which I thought was they just wanted to run the ball. I get you want to protect Tua, but you got to throw the ball sometimes.
You have to. But I mean, and the biggest thing here is this is actually a good opportunity for them to really exploit Arizona, because Arizona likes to play. They like to play the one high a lot and try to keep things in front of them, but they get vulnerable deep, which has happened quite a few times. And the opportunities were there. And like you said, they just weren't. That wasn't the game plan. I don't know if that was because it's Tua's first game back. We all heard the crowd go bananas when he slid.
That was fun.
And it was. But, I don't know what they do going forward. And it might just be too late to even care at this point.
Well, is it too late? Because you have a bunch of these teams on this next tier down, tier 7. Indy, Miami, the Giants, Cleveland, the Jets, and Jacksonville. Indy holds that playoff spot right now. I think it's them. It's them or it's Denver. Yeah, it's the Colts, the Chargers are all right there. I forgot the Ravens are 5-3, so they're actually tied behind Denver. Denver's ahead of them in the AFC standings. But it seems like Denver, the Colts, and the Chargers are kind of the teams in 2 spots for those 3 teams right now. And then you have the Bengals, Dolphins, Browns, Raiders, Jacksonville, Patriots, Jets, all with 2 wins. Like, one of those teams I think is going to go on a run and catch up, because either Denver's going to fall back, the Chargers are going to fall back. And I just don't believe in the Colts. And I don't think that they'll turn to Joe Flacco. Maybe they will, because Anthony Richardson's too tired to play in the games. I get it. I get sleepy. I got little kids. It happens. But I just don't think that the franchise can turn. If you turn over the keys to Joe Flacco right now to be a team that gets beat up on in the first round, and that's what you've decided to do, like, Richardson can't come back after that. It's the same situation that Carolina has with Bryce Young right now. The fact that they took him out means he's done. Plain and simple. You can't do that to Richardson. You got to let him play through it. Or you've made the decision that he's done.
We had this conversation, and I disagree. I think that you just have to understand that just because it's today's NFL doesn't mean that you have to adhere to today's NFL rules. And today's NFL rules is, as you know, and we've seen it so far, what do we have since day one of this season with the Patriots? When is it going to be Drake May? It's obviously not Brissett. When is it going to be Drake May? Are we going to get him in there? It should be Drake May. This is dumb, because the NFL and the fans are a now when it comes to quarterbacks. And we know this. We joke about wins and losses for quarterbacks all the time. We say, like, go to Eli Manning. You're going to be a Hall of Famer. And like, people will argue, and I won't argue much with them. I was a Giants fan at the time and won't argue much with them. Philip Rivers is a better quarterback. No Super Bowl wins. And we just have this because it comes down to wins. The Colts, Richardson's not clearly ready to play and pass in the NFL. You take away that Josh Downs play, and yes, I will. I always argue, don't take away plays. I will, because that was broken coverage, and everybody in the league can make that throw. You can have wide receivers making that throw to Josh Downs to get that touchdown. We saw how miserable it was outside of that, and him running the ball is not going to fix it. He needs to learn. There is the chance that he's a complete bust. His career might be over just because he just might not be an NFL quarterback. So his career's over because it never began. He just can't succeed in the NFL. But until he learns from somebody like Joe Flacco and not from Gardner Minshew last year, and actually learns, I don't know, were you the one that brought this up, or Meany was the one that brought it up to me and said this? And I thought it was a really good point. When he sat last year and even sat a lot behind Minshew, was he really learning, in quotes, because he knew he was the quarterback? He knew the job was his next year. He knew the job, when healthy, is his. Same thing this year when he got hurt. He knew the job was his. The coach, Steichen, even keeps saying it. The job is his. The job is his. The job is his. He needs to know the job's not his if he keeps playing this bad. I think that's why they can make the chance.
That most definitely was not me who said that, because it would be my contention that if the quarterback isn't actively trying to get better, whether the job is his or isn't, he is not the quarterback. You need to get rid of him. That's not how successful quarterbacks operate. We've never seen that happen ever in the NFL.
And I don't disagree with you, but that's why I think it needs to get into his head. And if it is, it's speculation by Meany, and I agreed with it, is that he needs to be benched and understood that, like, this is not acceptable, like, play. Like, that you need to improve. You need to learn. If you think you're going to get away with it, it's the Marquise Lee thing I always threw about you for years with wide receivers. Marquise Lee dominated college because he was on another level of everybody else, but he was lazy in his routes and he was lazy in his technique. He got to the NFL, exposed for the first 3-4 years of his career because he kept trying to do the same thing. And he finally turned the corner. Unfortunately, he got hurt briefly after that. But I think that's a similar comparison, is that Anthony Richardson got away with it in college because you throw the deep ball, Pierce will back with him. Like, the guys get deep, he just flings it downfield and he takes off running. and he can dominate in college because not many teams can stop that in college. The NFL can. So I do think he needs to actually be benched. And I think you can get away with it in the fact that just understand, hey, not every quarterback needs to be the answer right out of the gate.
They don't, but now he already missed the year. You bench him in year 2. That if he, like, is the job his automatically next year?
No, I think that's where you leave the door open and say, hey, you know what?
But you win. Let's say he wins a competition with someone, whether it's Flacco or not, and then he sucks through 4 games again. Like, you've now wasted another year. You still don't know. Like, you kind of have to figure it out after this year, whether you know or you don't know, because you need to move on very quickly. Because you can't have him waiting in the ether, whether you know or don't know, and then the contract extension comes up, and you have to pay quarterbacks, and then all of a sudden you just end up in a really crappy spot. Like, getting it wrong sucks, but acknowledging that you got it wrong is still very important at the same time. Like, where would the Cardinals be right now if they hadn't drafted Kyler first overall after giving up on, what the hell was that guy's name? Chosen Rosen, that guy.
Josh Rosen? Yeah. No, and I think you get that answer next year. Like, you're winning too many games right now. You're too solid-ish of a team. And the answer at quarterback this year is probably 2 guys. And if you're not inside the top 3 or 4, you're not getting them, because there's already 7 teams inside the top 10 picks as of today that you could argue are going quarterback. So that's why I say, figure it out, bench him, go Flacco. You're going to be a playoff team. Okay, maybe you're one and no. I said likely. Maybe you're a one and done. Maybe you're just in contention. Fans don't care because you're rooting for a playoff team. They're going, yeah, excited, we're good. But you weren't going to be a top 5 pick anyway. So yes, you get the answer next year. And if he sucks next year, you play him the entire season and just never bench him, and then you end up with a top pick, and then you're only, it's the 3rd year. You're not even talking about the rookie contract yet.
No, so I think I would rather know this year whether it is or isn't, because best case scenario, I think for the Colts is a 1st-round loss. That's best case scenario with Flacco. They still probably don't even make the playoff. And I don't care about getting, listen, I would want to have the top end pick, absolutely, but I'd rather have to know right now whether Richardson is or is not the guy and not have to wait another year to do that, because I can start planning for the future now.
I think the ceiling is higher than about 2 guys in this draft class, and I'd rather.
Yeah, but it's not about replacing him next year with a quarterback. Like, you can if that opportunity presents itself, but just having the better pick, but just knowing is the big thing. Knowing that this is not the guy.
It's half the battle.
It is, but if you kick that can down the road another year, then that's another wasted year. That you're not you could start the rebuild right now, not 18 months from now. Or you could just get it right now, continue to play Richardson. He evolves through those reps, and he is the guy.
See that, and I don't know that he does right now, and I don't think it's going to change this year, which is why. And I still think the ceiling, if he's just a mid-level quarterback, is the biggest threat in the NFL, or bigger threat in the NFL than a lot of quarterbacks. So that's why. But we got to wrap things up here, so we got to get through the rest of these teams.
All right. Tier number 8, New Orleans, Las Vegas, New England, and Tennessee. Drake May is probably going to miss the week. New Orleans, I think, is going to be underrated a little bit for a few weeks, because I think they're going to be substantially better when Derek Carr comes back.
And I think Derek Carr hopefully does the Calvin Ridley of the Chris Olave, is just, hey, you get 12 targets a game. And that's going to be fun.
You cannot give Chris Olave 12 targets a game, because he gets like concussed on 1/3 of his catches.
Why did you have to throw that into existence? I have Chris Olave in 2 leagues.
He had to leave the game yesterday. he got, coming off a concussion. It looked like he got concussed again. Unfortunately, he was able to come back. But, man, dude I don't know what it is, like if he catches the ball with his head down or what's going on, but he seems very prone to getting hit in the head. And then I have Carolina on a tier by their own at 32. They're just a trade.
They are, but yeah. So the biggest one I'd say I'd pull out of this entire thing is I'd say both New York teams need to be down there with the Raiders and Patriots, but that's just me.
Yeah, maybe. It was a nice win for the Patriots. I still think the Jets are better than the Jags.
Then the Jags should just be down there too.
Yeah, well, we're trying to be nice to some of these franchises. Give them a little bit of a boost. Jake, that's what we do on this show. And hate everyone's favorite team, apparently.
They're all the worst.
Yeah, they're all the worst, and you hate my favorite team. That means you hate me. Why do you do that? You don't know. I don't watch any other team in the league, Jake. Have you ever even seen my team play? I've seen all of their snaps 3 million times. I always enjoy that. It's like, yeah, I watch my team all the time. It's like, yeah, so you've never seen any of the other teams. How do you have any point of comparison?
Do you ever watch the games at times before too?
I always tell people
Like
I don't.
reference-
I've never actually seen a football game. That's what makes me so objective.
You don't even check the box scores.
No, I just go off vibes. I just patrol Twitter, read some articles, and be like, all right, that's the vibe of this team that I'm getting.
What's the word that we're gonna sound so? I'm gonna sound whatever the kids are saying these days. You have like the skrill or whatever. I don't know, whatever it is. The new word for like how cool you are.
You got the Riz?
You know
Is that what you're talking about?
Riz, there you go. See,
so-
I told you it was gonna sound old.
You're so old, Jake. It's unbelievable. You can't be a young man like me.
We're both millennials, right?
No. I'm Gen Z. I'm 23 years old.
Okay.
When we first started doing the show, I was 9. So
you
just didn't know it. You just didn't know it
Put
at
you
the
in the
time.
Hall of Fame yet?
I should be in the Hall of Fame. Listen, I was the Kids Hall of Fame, the Teen Hall of Fame. I still have like 20 years to go get in the real Hall of Fame here, but I'll be fine when it comes down to it. TheAthletic.com. Your waivers come out Monday night, rankings on Tuesday night.
Yep.
There
Midnight,
it is.
both nights.
At AllenKid on X as well. If you want to follow Jake, follow me at ThePME. Sub to the channel to get in that draw code. Mayo at Underdog, and that will do it. I shall see you next time.
Mayo experience! Experience!